Firmament Supreme. It's Firmament Supreme. He's not dead. The faceless man's heart trembled, his body going cold and his breath almost freezing. In the distance, as if in response to his voice, a giant golden halo of spacetime appeared in the air. Inside this halo was a region of collapsed space. Suddenly, in a flash of light, a disheveled Firmament Supreme emerged from the spacetime tunnel. His emblematic silver robe was now in tatters and stained with blood, retaining not even a shred of its former elegance. Firmament Supreme's breathing was ragged and his chest was slightly caved in. It was clear that Firmament Supreme had been badly wounded by that enormous explosion, but he was still alive. Swoosh! Firmament Supreme waved his hand, upon which that golden short halberd shrilly flew through the air and back into his hand. Firmament Supreme's body seethed with baneful energy, his eyes freezing cold as he glared at Wang Chong. "Did you think you could escape?" Firmament Supreme gnashed his teeth as his icy voice resonated through the world. Wang Chong, the nightmare beast, and the faceless man almost stopped breathing. Not dead. Such a large explosion, such destructive energy. Wang Chong had not presumed that anyone could survive this, but to his utter shock, Firmament Supreme had survived, and he could still control spacetime. Wang Chong felt as if he had been dropped into an icehouse. His entire body tensed, and only one thought remained in his mind. Run. Firmament Supreme was far more powerful than he had predicted, and he was not capable of winning against him. Though Firmament Supreme was heavily injured and significantly weakened, Wang Chong had also been badly injured in the explosion. Wang Chong's Divine Embryo 1 had additionally been injured by Firmament Supreme's ritual tool. He didn't know what that golden short halberd was made of, but it was unbelievably powerful. If Divine Embryo 1 couldn't block it, then neither could the other Divine Embryos. Wang Chong's plans had been thrown into complete disarray. If he wanted to live, he could only flee. Run. Split up. Wang Chong called out to the faceless man. Firmament Supreme was simply too frightening. If the four of them were together, they would all die. But if they split up, Firmament Supreme would only target him, so the faceless man at least could escape. Buzz. Divine Embryo 1 suppressed the pain, grabbed Divine Embryos 2 and 3, and sank into the ground with earth movement, the soil rippling outward as they disappeared. Firmament Supreme's savage halberd had torn straight through his Shanzhong point, which would have meant death for a body of regular flesh and blood. But divine embryos were natural products that were slowly created over the course of tens of thousands of years. They had an extremely formidable vitality, but even so, Divine Embryo 1 was badly wounded, as was the soul and consciousness that Wang Chong had attached to it. Dirt parted like water before Divine Embryo 1 as it tunneled through the earth. Divine Embryos 2 and 3 transferred all their energy to it so that it could focus entirely on escaping. Grotto Heaven Realm experts had absolute dominance over the sky and surface. No matter how Wang Chong ran, he would never be able to escape Firmament Supreme. If Wang Chong wanted to get out from Firmament Supreme's grasp, his only chance was underground. Whether it was True Lord Yellow Dragon, Genesis Supreme, or Firmament Supreme, these Grotto Heaven experts did not possess earth movement abilities. Grotto Heaven experts have a psychic energy range of around 100 li. Once I get out of this range, even someone of Firmament Supreme's strength can't do anything to me. Wang Chong went numb with fear, and his heart thumped rapidly. The danger presented by Firmament Supreme followed him like a shadow, or a maggot clinging to bone. His only hope was that the earth would prove enough of an obstruction that Firmament Supreme would not be able to deal with him. Bang! An intense feeling of danger came from behind him, and Wang Chong immediately changed directions, making an arc in the subterranean world as he changed course. As he did so, a golden short halberd came out of nowhere and slammed into Wang Chong's original position, the explosion of stellar energy sending quakes through the earth. If Wang Chong had been just a little slower, he would have been heavily injured by this blow. Delish! After this miss, a palm-sized halo of spacetime appeared around the halberd, vibrating for a moment before vanishing together with the halberd. The power of spacetime. When Wang Chong saw this, his heart trembled. He had not expected Firmament Supreme to be capable of merging his power of spacetime with his short halberd, allowing him to ignore the Earth and attack Wang Chong. The power of spacetime could not be defended against. Even though Wang Chong had burrowed into the ground, Firmament Supreme's golden halberd could still reach him. Bang! As he was thinking, he once more felt danger, and his heart tightened as he swerved down. Where he had been standing, the golden halberd appeared again, but this time with even greater force. The explosion was so great that the surrounding earth for several thousand feet around crumbled and caved in. Buzz! The small golden halo appeared again, and the halberd jumped inside and disappeared. On the surface, Firmament Supreme opened his hand. A halo of spacetime appeared in front of him, and that halberd entered his hand. Even though Wang Chong had perfectly dodged the last two attacks, Firmament Supreme remained unmoved and unperturbed. He crossed several thousand feet with a single step, instantly appearing where Wang Chong had used his earth movement ability. Humph! Get out here. You can't escape. His eyes cold, he squatted down and reached out with his hand into the ground. Rumble! The earth around Firmament Supreme quaked, all of the surface for tens of thousands of feet trembling as golden halos of spacetime spread out and traveled into the earth. Deep underground, Wang Chong was fleeing deeper into the earth when golden light suddenly appeared around him. The water-like dirt around him instantly became as tough as steel, and a massive golden halo appeared around the three divine embryos. Not good. Wang Chong instantly paled. He instinctively unleashed stellar energy to break free, but it was too late. Boom! A tremendous force pulled Wang Chong's three clones upward. Come out! Firmament Supreme's bone-chilling voice exploded into his ears. The pitch-black underground world disappeared, and in the blink of an eye, Wang Chong's three clones appeared on the snow-covered surface. In front of them was Firmament Supreme's familiar figure, looming there like a mountain. Wang Chong's body trembled, his heart sinking. Space-time sunder. Firmament Supreme's eyes flashed as he opened his hand. Space-time vibrated as golden halos burst forth and engulfed Wang Chong's clones. Move! The sense of danger reached maximum concentration. There was no time for anything else, so Wang Chong's clones lunged forward, pushing the Shadow Fiend art to its limits to dodge those dangerous halos of spacetime and attack Firmament Supreme. The Great Destruction Art. The Origin Lance. Life Execution. Majestic attacks erupted from the three divine embryos. The final attack, none other Su Jingqian's art of god and demon obliteration, had come from Divine Embryo 2. Bang! When Wang Chong's storm of attacks struck those halos of spacetime, the halos immediately dimmed and began to tremble. It works! Wang Chong was elated. Their earlier attacks had had no effect on Firmament Supreme, but now, though his attacks were still being blocked by the halos now appeared extremely unstable. This was proof enough that Firmament Supreme's injuries were much more severe than he had imagined, and that he still had a chance to fight back. A clown's tricks. Firmament Supreme scoffed in his aloof voice, and as he spoke, the halos of spacetime once more swept toward Wang Chong's group, ready to crush and tear. But at this moment, roar, an inhuman roar rang out, and the nightmare beast unleashed a tremendous amount of psychic energy that slammed into Firmament Supreme's mind. Firmament Supreme went pale, the golden halos pausing in the air, with half of them simply crumbling away. Master, his soul is injured much more badly than it appears. Find a way to attack his mind. The nightmare beast's anxious voice rang out in Wang Chong's mind. At that moment, the nightmare beast had discovered an enormous weakness on Firmament Supreme. While Firmament Supreme remained powerful and divine, his mind was far from that state. The explosion on the shores of the Caspian Sea had been caused by the combined effect of the collapsing teleportation gate and the exploding Azure energy core. Long before, Wang Chong had noticed that this energy core was unique, its energy capable of disrupting and damaging the mind, even freezing the soul. Firmament Supreme had been near the exploding energy core, and while he had survived, his mind was badly damaged, almost about to break apart. Bastard! So it was you. The corpse of a soul still dares to act so impudently against this god. Firmament Supreme's eyes chilled in realization, and his index finger thrust out. A powerful bolt of energy infused with the obliterating power of spacetime hurtled toward the Nightmare Beast core. If this attack struck, the Nightmare Beast core would be instantly destroyed. Careful! Wang Chong's heart trembled. While fighting with Firmament Supreme, he had been hiding the Nightmare Beast's energy. But while he could deceive a Grotto Heaven expert like Firmament Supreme for a moment, exposure was inevitable. Bang! Wang Chong summoned the Transformative Heaven to protect the Nightmare Beast core. Boom! Divine Embryo 1 shuddered and then flew out like a ragdoll. Ice-sealed world. Just when Firmament Supreme was about to pursue, Divine Embryo 3 flew up and unleashed all of its stellar energy. In an explosion of blue light, ice sealed the surrounding several dozen li, white frost manifesting out of nothing. It appeared as if the entire world had been frozen. All time stopped. In the middle of the ice-sealed world, a layer of ice enveloped Firmament Supreme. A good chance. Go! With the ice-sealed world freezing Firmament Supreme once more, Divine Embryo 2 swiftly summoned the Transmigration Heaven, having it take the form of a golden spear several dozen feet long and throwing it at Firmament Supreme. Cackalack! But a split second later, the cold ice cracked and fell apart before the golden spear could even get close. A white and fair fist struck out from the crumbling ice and blasted away Divine Embryos 2 and 3. You thought the same move would trip up this god twice? Firmament Supreme shook his body and immediately broke free of the ice-sealed world. The first use of the ice-sealed world had managed to seal Firmament Supreme for about a second, but now it couldn't even hold him for half a second. How could this be? Upon seeing this sight, Divine Embryo 3 went pale. Firmament Supreme had clearly developed a resistance to the ice-sealed world, which was ill news for the group. Meanwhile, Firmament Supreme did not rest after knocking away the 3 divine embryos. Die for me! Firmament Supreme coldly stomped forward, and the air rumbled with thunder. A moment later, a massive psychic storm centered around Firmament Supreme erupted. Boom! 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 With several explosions, the 3 divine embryos trembled and were sent flying once more. Divine Embryos 1 and 3, which had the worst injuries, went ghastly pale, their souls almost shattered by Firmament Supreme's strike. A centipede would not fall over even in death. It was true that Firmament Supreme had been heavily injured by the explosion, but he was still far stronger than Wang Chong's group. Even when this god is heavily injured, he can still kill you as easily as turning over his hand. He turned his hand over, and that terrifying and unstoppable golden short halberd appeared once more. Bang! With a forceful toss, the golden halberd flew out. Wang Chong's mind was shaken as a feeling of intense danger welled up. He had personally experienced the power of this short halberd before, so he well understood that he was incapable of stopping it. Boom! In a golden flash of light, Divine Embryo 3 was struck by the halberd. In the short time available to him, Wang Chong only had time to maneuver it to the side, just barely managing to avoid a lethal blow. Still, the halberd blew through the left shoulder, leaving a large, bloody hole. Not only that, the short halberd contained a special psychic energy, and Wang Chong felt a sudden headache. The soul and the mind of Divine Embryo 3 was half jolted out of the body, the connection almost breaking. The same happened to Divine Embryo 2. The golden halberd curved around and pierced through Divine Embryo 2's body. With one attack, Firmament Supreme's golden short halberd had heavily injured 2 of Wang Chong's divine embryos. Great destruction art. Seeing that the golden short halberd was continuing on toward Divine Embryo 1, Divine Embryo 1 unleashed the great destruction art. In a flash of light, a large black hole appeared, causing space and time to collapse. This attack finally managed to block the golden halberd, but even so, Divine Embryo 1 felt pain at its chest as the golden halberd once more struck its Shanzhong point. And this was after Wang Chong had minimized the impact of this golden halberd by as much as he could. Divine Embryo 1 trembled, vomited blood, and was sent flying once more. Too powerful. Wang Chong's expression was ashen. In the blink of an eye, the heavily injured Firmament Supreme had defeated all 3 of the divine embryos. When the grotto heaven stellar energy contained in the golden halberd passed through his body, it almost scattered all of Wang Chong's stellar energy, leaving his body racked with pain, almost paralyzed. And things were far from over. Humph! For daring to destroy this god's teleportation gate. This god will bury you together with the teleportation gate, so that you can experience the sensation of a body being ground into powder. Firmament Supreme's face was pale with rage, and his fingers snatched back the golden halberd. He was already badly injured, and using the power of spacetime so frequently was a heavy burden on him. But Firmament Supreme no longer cared. These 3 mice had destroyed the teleportation gate he had spent so much time and energy building. More importantly, the energy core was gone as well. This meant that he could not even rebuild the teleportation gate, which would affect the purification plan. He could already predict heaven's anger. And even more infuriating was that these 3 mice had dared to entrap him. In that previous explosion, if he had not managed to find a small spacetime crack at the final moment and use his power of spacetime to enter it, he would have been obliterated. But the explosion had nevertheless left an indelible wound on Firmament Supreme. Not only had he been weakened and his organs injured, his mind and his most precious grotto heaven law had been badly damaged by the impact. For the arrogant Firmament Supreme, this was an unprecedented disgrace. If he did not kill these 3 mice in the most painful fashion possible, how could he possibly vent all his rage? Clap! Firmament Supreme turned around and snapped his fingers. A massive golden halo of spacetime appeared around Wang Chong's 3 divine embryos. At the same time, a spacetime tunnel opened that led to the shores of the Caspian Sea. Whoosh! As the crashing of waves filled his ears and the cold and biting wind lashed his face, Wang Chong opened his eyes and found that Firmament Supreme had brought him back to the location of the teleportation gate. What made him even more uneasy was that giant black hole in the sky, still radiating terrifying energy. In that black hole, Wang Chong could sense that the fabric of spacetime was still collapsing. It was the teleportation gate, not yet destroyed. Wang Chong had not expected that the explosion produced by throwing the energy core into the teleportation gate would be so destructive that the energy had yet to dissipate. His heart thumped as he realized what Firmament Supreme was planning. He planned to throw the 3 divine embryos into the still-open spacetime black hole, utilizing the power of the collapsing spacetime to crush their bodies into dust so as to vent his hatred. Now die for this god. Firmament Supreme's emotionless voice resounded through the world. Buzz! A halo of spacetime with a diameter of 100-some feet appeared on the ground and swiftly locked down the surrounding space, rendering Wang Chong incapable of fleeing into the sky or into the ground. Firmament Supreme's fingers slightly opened, a tiny halo of spacetime appearing between them. The halo of spacetime trembled and rapidly turned, upon which the spacetime fabric of the entire region trembled. The air was brimming with tension. The danger in Wang Chong's heart reached a suffocating level. Life or death would be decided in a single moment. Wang Chong knew that once Firmament Supreme made his attack and threw him into the spacetime black hole, he would be doomed. What do I do? Countless thoughts flashed through Wang Chong's mind. Firmament Supreme was simply too strong, both in physical strength and mental strength, and this wasn't even considering that golden short halberd. Even if he used all his strength, he would still be no match. Firmament Supreme's power was overwhelming. After what was both like a second and like countless years, bzzz, an idea suddenly occurred to Wang Chong, and his fingers clenched in resolve. This was it. There's nothing to be done. I can only try this move. Wang Chong clenched his teeth, a determined look on his face. Bang! Just as Firmament Supreme was preparing to throw Wang Chong's divine embryos into the spacetime black hole, Wang Chong's divine embryos rose into the air, the ground around them trembling as they harnessed all their energy and attacked Firmament Supreme. Heaven and earth created as one. The myriad things annihilated together. 2 roars exploded through the air. A terrifying storm of energy manifested in the air. To Firmament Supreme's left, Divine Embryo 2 transformed into a massive ball of flame, as crimson as blood but more searing than the sun. On the right side, Divine Embryo 3, with its ice element talent, unleashed all of its energy and turned into a freezing silver ball. The two giant spheres represented yang and yin, hot and cold, the two opposite energies of the world. Boom! In a flash, the two giant spheres slammed together, the fusion of these two energies shifting into a massive taiji diagram. Heaven and earth created as one, the myriad things annihilated together. This was the joint attack used by Wang Chong and the demonic Emperor Old Man in the Battle of Talas to defeat Kateba, a new technique that the master and disciple had developed together. Though this move was derived from the great Yin-Yang heaven creation art, it had transcended to a divine level, grasping the ultimate secrets of Yin and Yang. It was no longer a simple art, but one of the mysterious principles of the world. It was this that had allowed Wang Chong and his master to defeat Kateba. But once Wang Chong and the demonic Emperor Old Man had calmed down and were able to comprehend the technique so that they could incorporate it into the great Yin-Yang heaven creation art, they began to understand that it was far more complicated than they first thought. To use this technique, one first had to cultivate the great Yin-Yang heaven creation art, and then one had to comprehend the two primordial principles of Yin and Yang, the progenitors of all things under heaven. This level of comprehension alone was something that very few people could reach. Secondly, the two extremes of Yin and Yang emphasized balance. If Yang was too strong or Yin was too strong, even if it was only by a hair, the imbalance would lead to a massive explosion. In truth, Wang Chong and the demonic Emperor Old Man had successfully used this move during the Battle of Talas mostly due to luck. Wang Chong and the demonic Emperor Old Man had tried it many more times afterwards. Moreover, as this move had absorbed much of their energy, the explosions had contained tremendous power that had left them both rather injured. In the end, they had been forced to stop their experiments. Unfamiliarity with the technique and the enormous danger it represented had made Wang Chong unwilling to use the move this entire time. But now that his life was on the line, he could no longer worry about such things. This was the only move he had that could threaten Firmament Supreme. Bang! As the Yin and Yang energies of the two divine embryos merged together, the fusion produced a fundamentally different power that made even Firmament Supreme pale. But at this moment, these two entirely different energies not only failed to fuse, they began to collide together, rapidly devolving into what seemed to be an extremely unstable explosion. Wang Chong's heart sank like a stone. It was clear that divine embryos 2 and 3 had not achieved balance. The move had failed. Were they really all going to die here? Wang Chong turned ghastly pale. No, there was still one last chance. Just when the two spheres were about to explode, Wang Chong clenched his teeth and unleashed the power of Divine Embryo 1. Great Yin-Yang Heaven Creation Art. Wang Chong unleashed this supreme art before Firmament Supreme could react. Divine Embryo 1 charged in before the two spheres could erupt. A moment later, the two clashing spheres rapidly stabilized, fusing and turning as they took the form of a massive taiji diagram. Divine Embryo 1 was serving as a balancer, allowing the Yin and Yang to reach equilibrium. Heaven and earth created as one. The myriad things annihilated together. Go! Wang Chong erupted with energy, gathering the power of 3 divine embryos to produce an unprecedented attack. Bang! The energies of all 3 divine embryos fused together, transforming into a black sphere of destructive energy that shot toward Firmament Supreme like a bolt of lightning. What is this? A look of extreme shock appeared on Firmament Supreme's face, his eyes flying open. Though the 3 divine embryos were powerful, they had yet to fully mature. In front of a Grotto Heaven expert like Firmament Supreme, they were far too weak, so Firmament Supreme regarded them as 3 little mice. In Firmament Supreme's eyes, these 3 were just lambs to the slaughter. But at this moment, the terrifying energy created by the fusion of their 3 energies shook Firmament Supreme to his core. Buzz! Firmament Supreme flicked his fingers, rapidly forming halos of spacetime of various sizes in front of him. Firmament Supreme attempted to use this method to stop Wang Chong's heaven and earth created as one, the myriad things annihilated together. But at this moment, Firmament Supreme's halos of spacetime seemed to be made of paper, crumbling to pieces in the face of the attack. This black sphere brimming with the aura of death blasted through all obstructions and slammed into Firmament Supreme, pushing him toward that space-time black hole that was on the verge of disappearing. Af! Firmament Supreme screamed and vomited blood, his face turning as white as a sheet of paper. After this mighty attack, he was so weakened that he fell out of the grotto heaven realm. But with a great clang, a golden halo of space-time appeared behind Firmament Supreme, preventing him from falling into the space-time black hole. You damn! Firmament Supreme stabilized himself, clenching his teeth as he glared murderously at the three divine embryos. But before he could finish speaking, he howled in pain. Master, he's at the end of his strength. We can use this chance to absorb his energy. At some point, the faceless man had appeared next to Firmament Supreme, grimly grabbing his left leg as his body erupted with hazy light. The images of the sun and moon appeared behind him. It was clear that he was using the great yin-yang heaven creation art to madly devour the stellar energy inside Firmament Supreme. You're seeking death. Infuriated, Firmament Supreme pressed down his palm, striking the faceless man on the back. This palm contained such power that the faceless man's stellar energy was scattered and blood erupted from his pores, his aura turning dim and weak. In the past, Firmament Supreme's enraged strike would have killed someone of the faceless man's cultivation level with one strike. But now, though he vomited blood from his severe injuries, the faceless man didn't die. Not only that, the faceless man continued to tightly hold Firmament Supreme's left leg and absorb energy using the great yin-yang heaven creation art. Go! Wang Chong immediately reacted, his three divine embryos lunging at Firmament Supreme. Boom boom boom. The air rumbled as images of the sun and moon manifested. The divine embryos grabbed onto Firmament Supreme's arms and right leg and activated their great yin-yang heaven creation art. In terms of cultivation, Wang Chong's divine embryos were far superior to the faceless man. As the suns and moons appeared and illuminated the world, the grotto heaven stellar energy of Firmament Supreme madly flowed out and into bodies of the three divine embryos. At any other time, even if Firmament Supreme just stood there and allowed Wang Chong to use his great yin-yang heaven creation art, Wang Chong might not have been capable of moving the grotto heaven stellar energy. But now, after the explosion of the teleportation gate and Wang Chong's fusion strike, Firmament Supreme was at his weakest. Seeking death, Firmament Supreme was shocked and furious. He had not expected that Wang Chong's group would be so insane that these puny people with their lowly Saint Martial realm and subtle realm cultivation levels would dare to absorb the power of a grotto heaven realm expert. With a thought, Firmament Supreme summoned more halos of spacetime, and in one of these was that sharp and unstoppable golden short halberd. The halberd was clearly much weaker than before, and the halo of spacetime around it was also much dimmer and extremely unstable. To Firmament Supreme's consternation, the more he used his energy, the faster Wang Chong's three divine embryos absorbed his energy. On the other side, Wang Chong scowled upon seeing the golden short halberd appear, danger welling up in his mind. Nightmare beast! Wang Chong mentally bellowed. Roar! The nightmare beast angrily howled in response. Just when Firmament Supreme was about to strike, the nightmare beast's formidable psychic energy slammed into his mind. Bang bang bang. In a series of explosions, Firmament Supreme's halos of spacetime crumbled under the assault, and his golden short halberd was knocked flying into the distance, hitting the ground with a clang. Firmament Supreme was thrown into disarray by the multiple explosions. His shoulder turned into mangled flesh. You bastards! Firmament Supreme's eyes turned crimson. His four limbs were seized by Wang Chong's three divine embryos and the faceless man. But at this moment, his body suddenly erupted with strength. His left arm shook off the binding of Divine Embryo 1, and in extreme rage, he thrust a palm at Divine Embryo 3's back. Bang! There was so much power in this palm that the stellar energy around Divine Embryo 3 was immediately scattered, half of its body pushed into the earth. Even a small part of the soul was dispersed by the strike, Firmament Supreme's palm almost instantly killing it. But even so, Divine Embryo 3 clenched its teeth and grimly clung to Firmament Supreme's left leg. Not only that, Divine Embryo 3 continued to frenziedly devour Firmament Supreme's grotto heaven stellar energy. At this moment, Divine Embryo 1 lunged back and grabbed onto Firmament Supreme's left arm, holding him down once more. With 4 people using the great Yin-Yang Heaven creation art, Firmament Supreme's Grotto Heaven stellar energy madly flowed out, and his aura grew weaker and weaker, his struggles more and more difficult. Master, attack his mind. His Grotto Heaven Law Core is supplying him with energy. If we can break his Grotto Heaven Core and absorb the law within, Master will be able to advance to the Grotto Heaven realm. The faceless man yelled out, his voice carrying a rare hint of emotion. The faceless man's understanding of the Grotto Heaven realm came entirely from Wang Chong. On their journey to the Caspian Sea, Wang Chong had explained to him many things about the Grotto Heaven realm. When one comprehended the laws of the world, one would form a Grotto Heaven core in one's mind. This was the product of the purest energy fused with the laws of the world. And through a space-time barrier, outsiders were not capable of sensing a Grotto Heaven realm expert's core, further guaranteeing the safety of the core. But now, Firmament Supreme was badly injured and his Grotto Heaven stellar energy was in disarray after being absorbed. Like a river running dry during a drought, exposing the riverbed, the secret of Grotto Heaven core of Firmament Supreme was now revealed. So strong. So this is a Grotto Heaven core. Even without the faceless man's reminder, Wang Chong could already sense the Grotto Heaven core in Firmament Supreme's mind. It was a rectangular crystal about the size of a thumb, with the transparency of glass. Though it was small, it was packed with boundless energy. More importantly, this was law energy, and Wang Chong could also sense the power of spacetime. A mountain in a mustard seed, the starry sky in a mote of dust. When one reached the Grotto Heaven realm and comprehended the secrets of spacetime, small and large were no longer opposites. Something as small as a mustard seed could contain a vast sea of energy. Small was large. Firmament Supreme's Grotto Heaven core might have been only the size of a thumb, but the amount of law energy it contained was unfathomable. It was an object that subtle realm experts could only dream about. For a moment, Wang Chong was completely entranced by the Grotto Heaven core. Wang Chong was tempted. If he could obtain Firmament Supreme's Grotto Heaven core and advance to the Grotto Heaven realm, he could contend against Genesis Supreme and the other Supremes without the need for external help. Boom boom boom. Wang Chong's 3 divine embryos and the faceless man unleashed all their psychic energy at Firmament Supreme's Grotto Heaven core. Roar! At the same time, the nightmare beast unleashed its own majestic psychic energy, sending it crashing into the Grotto Heaven core. In the face of this mighty assault, Firmament Supreme's Grotto Heaven core trembled, and that glassy, rectangular crystal crinkled as thin cracks appeared on its surface. Master! The faceless man is right. His Grotto Heaven core was damaged in the explosion and is no longer sturdy. By destroying it, we can utterly defeat him. The nightmare beast roared. It had the strongest psychic energy and the sharpest senses, so it was the first to realize the true situation of Firmament Supreme's Grotto Heaven core. In normal circumstances, a Grotto Heaven core was incredibly sturdy, not so fragile that one strike would produce a web of cracks. Firmament Supreme was far weaker than they had imagined. Boom boom boom. The 3 divine embryos, the faceless man, and the nightmare beast joined their powers and barraged Firmament Supreme's Grotto Heaven core. Firmament Supreme shuddered from the impact, and his Grotto Heaven stellar energy flowed out at an even faster rate. The cracks in the Grotto Heaven core widened, and a thin sliver of law energy leaked out. Wang Chong was elated by this development and pushed his power to its limit, madly devouring this law energy. Wonderful! This is law energy? Wang Chong couldn't help but sigh in wonder at the information contained in this law energy and its sheer power. It was a beautiful sensation that he had never experienced before. A Grotto Heaven law was different from any other kind of energy or law, different from the natural talents the divine embryos had awoken to. The law energy flowing through his body felt like sweet dew after a long drought, seeping into his heart. This law did not directly improve Wang Chong's power, but it did improve his understanding of the world's laws, particularly the laws of spacetime. Wang Chong's cultivation was not yet sufficient, but once he broke through, these laws would convert into Wang Chong's most essential power. Truly incredible. Wang Chong was intoxicated by this power. The power of spacetime surpassed all other laws and powers, could tempt any martial artist and drive them insane. This was an apex power. Again and again, Wang Chong worked with the Nightmare Beast to assail Firmament Supreme's Grotto Heaven core. He had sensed the power he had hungered for in Firmament Supreme. Wang Chong had originally been planning to quietly cultivate, borrowing the power of the divine embryos. In 1 or 2 years, he would have broken into the Grotto Heaven realm. But now he saw a shortcut. Once he obtained the power of spacetime from Firmament Supreme, he would have a chance of breaking into the Grotto Heaven realm far earlier. Crack! In just a few moments, Wang Chong and the Nightmare Beast had unleashed a terrifying psychic salvo. Finally, with a massive crack, the Grotto Heaven core was fully sundered open. Now is the moment. Sensing this surging river of Grotto Heaven law energy, Wang Chong's 3 divine embryos lunged, using the great yin-yang heaven creation art to its limit to madly devour this majestic energy. Madman! You madman! I'll kill you! You bastards! Firmament Supreme was anxious and enraged. He had never been so infuriated or afraid, and he had never before been pushed into such dire straits. He constantly struggled, trying to break free of the grips of Wang Chong and the Faceless Man. He tried to knock them away, injure them, use his power of spacetime, control the golden short halberd in the distance. But he failed. In truth, he couldn't even move. He could sense that his Grotto Heaven stellar energy had almost run dry and his vitality was also draining away. The Grotto Heaven law energy that he had spent thousands of years accumulating was also being plundered by Wang Chong. If this continued, he would become a part of the history of the Celestial God Organization, as the first Supreme to be devoured by puny ants. You damn ants! I'll bury all of you! Firmament Supreme raged, his beard trembling. Bang! At the final moment, in an extremely well-hidden part of Firmament Supreme's mind, a golden light suddenly appeared. As it shot out, it rapidly expanded and brightened. This light contained a world-destroying energy and seemed on the verge of eruption. Not good! Wang Chong, the Faceless Man, and the Nightmare Beast all trembled in shock, sensing extreme danger. The golden light in Firmament Supreme's mind seemed to be a pre-prepared and extremely formidable seal. Wang Chong sensed that this power even surpassed the Grotto Heaven realm. He understood that if this light exploded, he, the Faceless Man, and the Nightmare Beast would all be obliterated. Run! He immediately stopped absorbing Grotto Heaven law energy, released his grip on Firmament Supreme, and began to flee. Firmament Supreme's bone-chilling and emotionless voice resounded in his ear. It's too late to think about escaping. Wang Chong sensed his body go rigid as a giant golden halo appeared around him, sealing Wang Chong, Firmament Supreme, and the entire region. As the massive golden halo appeared, mysterious black characters began to rush down like waterfalls. Each one of these characters contained pure, concentrated destructive energy. This destructive energy clearly shared the same origin as the golden light in Firmament Supreme's mind. They had clearly been created by the power of the seal. None of you will leave. All of you will die. Firmament Supreme's hateful voice came from behind them. The golden light was a seal granted to him by heaven, only to be used when his death was certain. Once the seal was activated, no one could escape, not even himself. On the other end, Wang Chong could feel the sense of danger surging. Firmament Supreme had gone mad, willing to give up his own life to avenge himself. But with the halo sealing his surroundings, Wang Chong had nowhere to run or hide. Buzz! Suddenly, Wang Chong looked at that space-time black hole behind Firmament Supreme, which had now shrunken to the size of an adult, and he had an idea. This is it! Wang Chong clenched his teeth and yelled, Nightmare Beast! Use psychic energy to suppress him. Faceless Man! Help me push him into the space-time black hole. To vent his rage, Firmament Supreme had brought them next to the teleportation gate, planning to throw them into the space-time black hole. But now, this had given them an opportunity to survive. Time was short, and the golden light erupting from Firmament Supreme's body was now 100 times brighter, like a sun dropping to the mortal world, packed with destructive energy. Firmament Supreme had already released it. Bang! At this moment, the nightmare beast struck, its steely psychic energy slamming into Firmament Supreme's mind. At the same time, the three divine embryos and the faceless man lunged forward, their hands pressing against Firmament Supreme and unleashing their stellar energy. Ah! No! Firmament Supreme's eyes flew open as he bitterly shrieked. He had not expected Wang Chong and the faceless man to turn around and use this move on him. He instinctively extended a hand to stop them, but with his grotto heaven core shattered and his body drained of stellar energy, he was not much stronger than an ordinary martial artist. Right after he extended his palm, his body was sent flying into the space-time black hole. Rumble! With a terrifying explosion, the space-time black hole collapsed. Within that chaotic region, Firmament Supreme's body exploded. The giant explosion shook the ground and the Caspian Sea with it, throwing up roaring waves. The shockwave threw back the three divine embryos and the faceless man, pushing them into the ground. The winds howled, and after a long time, the shores of the Caspian Sea finally calmed down. Firmament Supreme had vanished from existence. Cough, cough. After a long while, the three divine embryos and the faceless man finally began to get to their feet. Finally dead. Supremes are simply too frightening. Wang Chong scanned the area, thinking back to his battle with Firmament Supreme, his heart still thumping in fear. This was the most difficult battle Wang Chong had experienced. There had been several times where he had almost died to Firmament Supreme, but in the end, he had still won. Wang Chong stood up and said to the faceless man, "Come on. It's about time to leave." He opened his hand, upon which the golden halberd buried in the distant dirt flew into it. Although this journey had been very dangerous, the rewards had also been significant. Most importantly, he had destroyed a teleportation gate. Let's see what happens over at the capital. Whoosh! Wang Chong had no idea that as Firmament Supreme vanished out of existence within the space-time black hole, far away, chains jangled as a pair of golden eyes with vertical pupils flew open. Firmament Supreme? A teleportation gate has been destroyed, and Firmament Supreme is dead. The golden eyes showed a visible tinge of shock. How could this be? Li Tai is no longer here. How could there still be someone capable of killing Firmament Supreme? Someone, go to the shores of the Caspian Sea and investigate this at once. Heaven was far from the only one who was shocked. In the darkness of the capital, a figure sat cross-legged in the air, their energy fused with their surroundings. Buzz! Suddenly, a faint ripple passed through space and struck Genesis Supreme, causing his body to tremble and his eyes to open. This energy is Firmament Supreme. Genesis Supreme was in disbelief. In the Celestial God organization, the Supremes all shared a certain connection. This sort of connection was usually not obvious, but when a major shift took place, all the other Supremes would immediately be informed. Firmament Supreme was an extremely ancient existence of the Celestial God organization, of such prodigious strength that it was extremely rare for anything to happen to him. What in the world happened? That Firmament Supreme would suddenly die? Genesis Supreme's expression turned dark, his mind still shaken. Too sudden. Genesis Supreme and Firmament Supreme were both Supremes and had similar strengths. The sudden death of Firmament Supreme couldn't help but make him wary. "To me!" Genesis Supreme bellowed. A figure suddenly appeared behind him like a ghost. "Take a trip back. I need to know what happened by the Caspian Sea, and what in the world happened to Firmament Supreme." Genesis Supreme sternly said. "Yes." The figure silently vanished. Everything fell silent once more. Genesis Supreme turned to the brightly lit capital, enclosed within the miniature 9 provinces domain. Firmament Supreme's death is ill news. Heaven is undoubtedly furious. I must hasten the pace of the plan and eliminate the child of destruction. Time slowly passed. Within the capital, Wang Chong's actual body stood guard while Li Hang presided over the court, the two of them working in concert to keep order in the Great Tang. With the miniature 9 provinces domain, the men in black did not dare to enter the capital. This allowed the war machine of the Great Tang to spin up into full gear. Your Highness, it has only been a month, but the number of new applicants has already reached 1 million. After a rigorous selection process, 400,000 have started training. With the 300,000 we previously recruited, we now have 700,000 soldiers. Accounting for the regular army, the Great Tang army now numbers 1,300,000 soldiers. In the main hall, Xianxia bowed as he gave his report on the army. Wang Chong narrowed his eyes and asked, "How is the training going?" Everyone's enthusiasm is high, so they are very diligently training. Although only a short time has passed, they are already showing the basic form of an army. But we are still lacking middle-ranked officers to preside over the training. I've discussed the matter with Generals Su Hanshan and Li Sai to transfer more out from the army, and the two have already agreed, Xianxia respectfully said. Wang Chong subtly nodded. Xianxia was growing more and more proficient with his work. Not only was he in charge of the intelligence network, Wang Chong had also started to place him in charge of coordinating between the various divisions and officers of the army. Wang Chong called this new method cooperative engagement. Its goal was to encourage increased communication between the various generals of the Great Tang with a well-developed information network so that they could assist each other and allow each army to fight at its best. There is also one other matter. Xianxia raised his head and glanced at Wang Chong. "Talk," Wang Chong calmly said. "The quality of recruits is extremely high, and many of them are at a high tier of the true martial realm, with a significant number reaching the profound martial realm. It seems as if normally reclusive experts have also signed up, and all the great generals and protector generals have started eyeing these recruits. Lord Zhangzhou Jianxiong has transferred out 30,000 recruits to fill the ranks of his Annan Protectorate Army. The Imperial Forest Army and Xuanwu Army have also taken 5,000 men. The Crown Prince's junior guardian asked for a copy of the register and took 15,000 men from the register of outstanding recruits. And while Protector Generals Gao Xianji and Insishun are far off in Arabia, I have heard that they also sent representatives for this recruitment drive, each taking 20,000 men to replenish the ranks of the Divine Martial Army and Dragon Stallion Army. Even Great General Abusi has taken 2,000 men. By the end, Xianxia had a strange expression. The Tongluo did not exceed 10,000 and were invincible above it. This referred to none other than Abusi's Tongluo cavalry. But everyone knew that the Tongluo cavalry recruited only the Tongluo. They didn't even take in other Hu. It was very strange for them to make an exception. Wang Chong said nothing. Only his eyes rippled faintly. He was not too surprised by this development. The number of quality recruits was truly too high. The Crown Prince's junior guardian, Zhangzhou Jianxiong, Gao Xianji, and Insishun could not be blamed for being tempted. After consecutive wars, the various armies of the Great Tang had been left battered and bruised. They needed new blood to replenish their ranks, and these elite recruits could be more easily trained up to the standard. Of course, these protector generals and great generals not only wanted to replenish their ranks, but expand them. These people had already brought this matter up with him. Inform Li Sai and Cui Piaoqi to transfer out some of the outstanding recruits for placement in the Wuxian Cavalry and Mo Saber unit. It's about time these two armies were expanded, Wang Chong said. In the past, the Wuxian Cavalry and Mo Saber unit had been more than enough to deal with any danger, but with the calamity imminent, their numbers were far from enough. The Wuxian Cavalry's power had initially been established on the strength, agility, and cohesion of the Wuxian people. But constantly recruiting from the ranks of the Wuxian was rather unfair, and their numbers were limited, preventing the Wuxian Cavalry from rising to an even higher level. Now that there were so many outstanding recruits amongst this newest batch, it was time for some reform. General Li saw the other protector generals and great generals doing this and already transferred out his own soldiers. He took 50,000 of the finest recruits to replenish the ranks of the Mo Saber unit and the Wuxian Cavalry, in addition secretly tasking me with bringing up this matter with your highness to gain your approval. Wang Chong was taken aback by this news. Then he shook his head and laughed. Li Sai appeared like a boorish brute, but he was actually quite cunning. It was obvious that he had also been tempted by these recruits. Wang Chong waved his hands and indifferently said, I understand. Everything followed the plan, and these recruits all entered the armies of the Great Tang, whether it was under the command of Li Sai or the various protectorates. In fact, whether it was Crown Prince's junior guardian Wang Zhongxi, Minister of War Zhangchou Jianxiong, Gao Xianji, and Sishun, or Li Sai, they all had extremely good judgment. Moreover, armies like the Wuxian cavalry did not easily accept new soldiers. For these commanders to eye these recruits was proof that these soldiers were of extremely high quality. What's the situation of the forward base? Wang Chong changed the topic to the matter of the front line. This was an important part of the plan. Everything is going according to plan. The fortifications are already being built. When Inauthentic and his Yuzhou soldiers first heard the news, they truly wanted to send soldiers to the forward base to help out. But once they heard that the Crown Prince's junior guardian was involved, they restrained themselves. In addition, Tong Luo Great General Abusi and his Tong Luo cavalry have finally arrived, further intimidating Inauthentic. Zhang Ke's expression focused as he hastily reported. Wang Chong gave a slight nod, his expression turning thoughtful. He could sense that Genesis Supreme was still patrolling the outskirts of the capital. These Supremes were extremely arrogant people. At this phase, they would never lower themselves to intervene in mortal wars. Moreover, both Abusi and Wang Zhongxi were renowned generals, and killing them would unquestionably reveal the existence of the men in black to the world. It was impossible for peak experts like Abusi and Wang Zhongxi to suddenly die a violent death when no war was going on, nor were they people that just anyone could kill. And this was completely out of line with the men in black's policy of shunning the world. The men in black had existed for countless years, but history had no record of them. This was how effective this policy of shunning the world was. But nothing was absolute. The existence of the Book of Paimon clearly indicated that there had once been a time when the men in black directly meddled with the mortal world. Thus, Wang Chong could not take risks, nor could he place his hopes on the kindness of Genesis Supreme and his ilk. Wang Chong questioned Zhang Ke a little more on military matters, and once everything was taken care of, Zhang Ke bowed and left. Whoosh! Once Zhang Ke left, the flapping of wings came from outside. What news is there from the palace? Wang Chong's expression darkened as he spoke into the empty hall. Silence. Nothing happened in the hall. But quickly, a bulky figure with a bird perched on his arm came inside. It was none other than Old Eagle. Old Eagle bowed and said, Everything in the palace is as usual. With General Li and so many dragon guards, nothing will happen to His Majesty. However, Bian Lingqing's Imperial Guard has sent word that there have been many strange incidents in the palace as of late. People are constantly trying to sneak in. The Imperial Guard has already caught more than 20 supposed palace maids, eunuchs, and Imperial Army soldiers, and more have arrived in the last few days. Some of them have even gone up to Taiji Palace, where they seem to be setting up some sort of formation. Zhang Ke had more and more matters to handle, and Li Heng was an extremely important figure. Thus, Wang Chong had arranged for Old Eagle to link up with Bian Lingqing so that the two could support each other. Moreover, the King of Foreign Lands' residence was very close to the Imperial Palace. If there were some incident, Wang Chong could promptly arrive to protect Li Heng. A new emperor had taken the throne, and whether it was the surrounding countries, Inauthentic or the men in black, they all had ample reason to strike at him. Thus, Wang Chong did not dare to be lax. The sage emperor had passed, so nothing could be allowed to happen to Li Heng. I see. Wang Chong slightly frowned, closing his eyes and leaning back against his throne. Your Highness, it's those men in black, right? Old Eagle suddenly asked. There's no one else except them, Wang Chong softly said, nodding slightly. Few of Wang Chong's subordinates knew about the miniature 9 provinces domain, and they were only informed due to absolute necessity, but Old Eagle was one of them. Your Highness, the Imperial Guard is already doing its utmost to catch these people. But there's still no stopping them, with more and more appearing. In addition, we've discovered that they've set up a small formation in the palace. Is this really okay? Old Eagle said, worry on his face. Why don't we start a large-scale search in the city and force them out? The imperial palace was the center of political power, a forbidden zone, but this seemed to have no effect on the men in black. On the contrary, it seemed to only encourage them to send more and more people. The strange activities had also been picking up around the estate, though they had yet to cause much of a stir. The king of foreign lands' residence was not that easy to sneak into. Old Eagle had already led his men in purging several of these groups. There's no need. Wang Chong waved his hand and rejected Old Eagle's proposal. The ones infiltrating the capital are not real men in black, but puppets under their control or blackmailed Imperial Army soldiers, mixed in with some experts and assassins that they hired. They're just ordinary people who are being used. If you sweep through the city, how can you tell which from which? And how many can you actually catch? Do you plan to seize everyone in the city? This? Old Eagle was rendered speechless. He instinctively sensed that this matter could not be allowed to fester, but he had not thought about it this far. But Old Eagle wanted to say more, but he hesitated. Relax, it's fine. The miniature 9 provinces domain is not easily destroyed, and we can't protect the entire capital. That's just a futile effort. Wang Chong knew what Old Eagle was thinking, and waved his hand. The 9 heavens, 10 earths, 3 emperors formation was deep beneath Taiji Palace and was one of the strongest and largest formations in the Central Plains. When it was first being built, possible attempts to destroy it had already been taken into account. As the formation that had protected dynasty after dynasty, it had countless reinforcing formations on its perimeter. 100,000 formations. 1 million formations. 10 million formations? Not even Wang Chong dared to imagine, as even psychic energy was blocked out. The 9 heavens, 10 earths, 3 emperors formation could be used to gather energy, but it could not be destroyed. This was a law passed down through dynasty after dynasty. If one thought that a few formations on the surface could destroy this powerful ancient formation, then that person was being far too naive. This was why Wang Chong was unconcerned after hearing about so many people fearlessly infiltrating the imperial palace to lay down formations. What they were attempting was impossible. Wang Chong was far more worried about another matter. Wang Chong slightly raised his head, a name flashing through his mind. Genesis Supreme. Everything that had taken place in the imperial palace and around the king of foreign lands' residence was the handiwork of the men in black. Their goal was undoubtedly to destroy the miniature 9 provinces domain. But these little tricks could do nothing to him. He predicted that the men in black's following actions would be even more intense and frenzied. Besides that, the Sage Emperor was dead and the miniature 9 provinces domain was a purely defensive formation. As long as the men in black did not step into it, it would do them no harm. There shouldn't have been anything in the capital that the men in black wanted. But even though the Sage Emperor had died some time ago, Genesis Supreme was still lurking on the outskirts. This was extremely unusual. It was as if there was something in the city Genesis Supreme dearly desired. Wang Chong breathed in and focused himself. No matter what you're thinking, I will stop you. Buzz. Wang Chong closed his eyes and seated himself cross-legged on the floor, his mind linking with the 3 divine embryos that were approaching the capital. He could sense that the 3 divine embryos would arrive soon. This mission had been far more fruitful than he had imagined. Once the 3 divine embryos returned, he could start the next phase of his plan and begin boosting his strength. Several days later, deep in the night, when everyone was dreaming, buzz, a flash of light appeared outside the city, and 2 figures stepped into the air, looking down at the brightly lit capital below. All of our operations have failed. This domain around the capital still stands. The Tianfu Divine Lord's robes flapped as he slowly raised his head. The darkness seemed empty, but to the eyes of an expert like the Tianfu Divine Lord, a vast dome covered the capital, surging with a sea of energy that could make anyone pale in fear. That Wang Chong is far too troublesome. He knows of our existence and refuses to leave the capital. And those assassins we found are far too weak to cause much of a stir. The Tianfu Divine Lord sighed. If this domain does not fall, we can do nothing to him. The men in black were immensely powerful and had many experts in their ranks. In the past, even toppling an empire was as easy as flipping a hand. But now, they could do nothing to the great Tang imperial household. Genesis Supreme said nothing, his brow furrowing. He naturally understood the current situation. He had tried to force his way into the capital before, but at the final moment, his Grotto Heaven expert intuition told him to give up on the idea. The miniature 9 provinces domain was just as dangerous to Grotto Heaven realm experts. Until the formation was broken, he did not dare to act recklessly. The Tianfu Divine Lord glanced at Genesis Supreme and hesitantly said, "Venerable One, why don't we capture some of his stronger subordinates and women he's close to, take them out of the city, and force him to come out? Those useless soldiers would never break the formation. They would need to take risky actions to destroy the formation, and this period of activity had not been completely fruitless for the Tianfu Divine Lord. While gathering information, he had discovered several women whom Wang Chong frequently interacted with. The men in black might not have been able to break the miniature 9 provinces domain or kill Wang Chong, but capturing a few ordinary women wouldn't be too difficult. In the past, the Tianfu Divine Lord would have never said such a thing, but after failing several times against Wang Chong and even being heavily injured, he was completely humiliated. He was now willing to resort to any method possible to kill Wang Chong. Buzz! The Tianfu Divine Lord had barely finished speaking when his surroundings fell silent and the temperature plunged. Bastard thing! Have you already fallen to this level because of that mortal? As a god, you would use such lowly methods? If this news got out, would you not become a laughingstock? Genesis Supreme turned to the Tianfu Divine Lord and coldly glared. As a supreme, an aloof god who looked down on all living beings, Genesis Supreme was extremely arrogant. For the Tianfu Divine Lord to bring up this suggestion was a humiliation for Genesis Supreme, a questioning of his ability. If a god lowered themselves to using such despicable methods against a mortal, how were they different from a mortal? They would naturally no longer have the right to call themselves a god. In addition, do you think that brat didn't also think of this? Your people would be caught and dealt with long before they would have a chance to escape the capital, Genesis Supreme coldly said. The domain around the capital was like a giant abyss, and inside and outside were 2 completely different worlds. There probably didn't exist a single person who could kidnap one of Wang Chong's women in the capital. As for Wang Chong's subordinates, what did it matter how many they captured? Would he really offer himself up for the sake of some subordinates? The Tianfu Divine Lord blushed in shame. It was this subordinate's mistake. The Tianfu Divine Lord paused, then lowered his head and said, "But, Venerable One, if this is the case, won't we be unable to obtain that object and complete the mission heaven gave us? What do we do next?" Genesis Supreme turned to the capital and coldly said, "Wait!" His voice was tinged with a farsighted and wise aura. "This god has a plan. There is no need for you to worry." His robes flapped in the wind, and his eyes were 2 deep pools of wisdom. The Tianfu Divine Lord hesitated, but ultimately, he lowered his head and said no more. Time flew by. Several days later, deep in the night, boom! The southern gates of the capital rumbled open, allowing a plain and unremarkable carriage, with 2 lanterns hanging from it, to leave. Not only was this carriage of simple design, the compartment was tightly wrapped up. It was obvious that the owner of the carriage did not want their face to be seen. But no ordinary person could have ordered the city guard to open the gates after their closing time. It was clear that the owner of the carriage had some revered status. Cough, cough. A tired cough came from inside the carriage. The compartment was lit by a single oil lamp, and the gloomy light shone upon a middle-aged man wearing an official's hat and dressed in casual robes. Although he seemed ordinary, the way he moved exuded a superior aura. An old servant in the carriage bowed and respectfully said, "Wise minister, you are unwell. It's late. So why don't we return to the residence to rest?" If Wang Chong had been present, he would have certainly started to see this middle-aged man and hear him referred to as wise minister. This man who was breaking the curfew to sneak out of the capital was none other than the man who had once dominated the court but who had now been squeezed out of the center of power after the rise of the new emperor, Li Linfu. And if there was any one person in the court who was still referred to as wise minister, it was Li Linfu. I know, Aji, but there are some things that this minister must take care of. There is no need for you to try and persuade me, Li Linfu indifferently said, appearing somewhat absent-minded. Is it because of the king of foreign lands? The old servant worriedly said as he raised a teapot and filled the porcelain cup on the small table in front of Li Linfu. The carriage was quiet. Li Linfu said nothing, but his brow visibly creased. He had secretly been spreading rumors about Wang Chong's ambiguous relationship with the western regions and the Sassanids, trying to imply that Wang Chong was harboring rebellious motives and estrange him from Li Hong. Li Linfu had worked very carefully, believing that he had left no evidence. But to his surprise, Wang Chong had still managed to find out, and the result of his displeasure was obvious. Old Eagle had returned the favor, publicizing how Li Linfu had backstabbed several major officials back in the day. Very few people had known about those old matters, but now almost everyone knew. Without firm evidence, such things would have never been able to affect his position, but now that he was a tiger out on the open plains, there were numerous people willing to beat him while he was down. Wang Chong's strategy was truly sublime. Even after the new emperor's enthronement, Li Linfu had still managed to keep some groups on his side. But once these scandals got out, even these officials who had once followed his lead began to break away. While no one spoke about it publicly and still called him wise minister, in truth, his reputation was dirt. Li Linfu had never experienced this sort of fall from grace before. The Wang clan. Li Linfu closed his eyes, his head slowly rising as his fingers began to tap. 30 years ago, the Wang clan had Wang Bo. 30 years later, the Wang clan now had Wang Chong. His destiny and his career were inextricably tied to the Wang clan. If the Wang clan declined, his career would thrive. If the Wang clan thrived, then he. Li Linfu felt hatred and reluctance welling up in his heart. The Wang clan was like the noon sun, and Wang Chong and Li Hong were bosom friends. There was nothing he could do. The old servant saw Li Linfu's dejected expression and mentally sighed. He wanted to do something, but he was helpless. After some time, the carriage came to a stop with a thump, and the driver outside called out, "Wise minister, we've arrived." A gentle breeze rustled the surrounding trees in the darkness. The carriage, after leaving the capital, had driven into a forest. Li Linfu opened his eyes. "You all stay here. Without my order, you are not to move," Li Linfu ordered, his expression grave. Creak. Aji watched in surprise as Li Linfu stood up, took the lantern, and exited through the carriage door. There was nothing outside besides the carriage. With the light of the lantern, Li Linfu found a white birch by the side of the road. He walked up to the tree, saw a fresh mark on its trunk, and nodded. "This is the place," Li Linfu mentally noted. "Wise minister, where are you going?" "Aji will accompany you." Aji's worried and concerned voice came from behind him. "There's no need." Li Linfu waved his sleeve and then quickly vanished into the forest. The old servant was left speechless. For some reason, he felt that his wise minister had been acting very strangely recently, as if he was deeply concerned. He had taken care of the wise minister for several decades, and they had been inseparable except during court sessions. This was the first time the wise minister had decided to go alone. Whoosh! Deep in the dark forest, the winds howled like the screeching of owls. With the lantern, Li Linfu navigated the uneven terrain as he ventured deeper in. His expression was cautious, but there was no hesitation. "Li Linfu, you're finally here. It has been a long time since we last met." In this frightening atmosphere, a ghostly voice resounded through the forest, and then, in a gust of wind, two figures appeared in front of Li Linfu. These two figures wore black robes and floated in the air, their bodies seemingly lifeless. If Wang Chong had been here, he would have been blown away, for these two were none other than Genesis Supreme and the Tianfu Divine Lord. Surprisingly, Li Linfu only momentarily trembled upon seeing Genesis Supreme and the Tianfu Divine Lord before quickly calming down. He raised his head and directly said, "Speak. Why did you come to find me?" Humph, you want to get away from us now that you've become the wise minister of the Great Tang? Don't forget how you got the position of Prime Minister. Genesis Supreme's voice was cold as he rudely spoke. An outsider would have undoubtedly been shocked to hear this. No one would have imagined the mighty Prime Minister of the Great Tang to have such a close relationship with the Men in Black. Moreover, from the words of the Men in Black, it was apparent that the Men in Black had played a significant role in getting Li Linfu the Prime Minister post. Such news was more than enough to shake the realm. Li Linfu said nothing, only let out a long sigh. Brought up and brought down by the same man. 20 years ago, he had been a complete nobody and completely useless, a member of a branch family of the imperial household that was frequently jeered at by others. In an unexpected turn of events, he saved Genesis Supreme, who was on the verge of death after failing to assassinate the Sage Emperor, and assisted him in hiding from the imperial army. After that, those two began to work together. With the help of Genesis Supreme and the Men in Black, along with his own natural talents in politics, Li Linfu had ascended smoothly until he finally reached the post of Prime Minister. In this process, many of his old enemies or rivals failed or were exiled for various reasons. Many people said that Li Linfu was a late bloomer, and his luck only erupted when he was 40-some years old and the Sage Emperor began to appreciate his talents, allowing him to reach his current place. Very few people knew that the Men in Black had been helping him this entire time. But the existence of the Men in Black was a taboo, and they were the Sage Emperor's mortal foes that he had spent many years attempting to annihilate. Thus, after assuming the post of Prime Minister, Li Linfu had been extremely cautious, avoiding any direct connection with the Men in Black. Unless it was absolutely necessary, he refused to use their strength. Alas, everything was decided 20-some years ago, and he could no longer escape his connection with the Men in Black. This is not what I mean. The new emperor is only recently enthroned, but your operations have been too frequent as of late. This is extremely unfavorable to me and can easily expose me, Li Linfu said. A man had to lower their head when the roof was too low, and even the revered Prime Minister of the Empire had to bow to the Men in Black. Humph, if we didn't do so, how could we make you come out of the city? If you continue to attempt to distance yourself from us, we might need to go a step farther, Genesis Supreme coldly said. Did Li Linfu think he could hide his plans from him? He had attempted to get in touch with Li Linfu several times, but Li Linfu had pretended to not receive his communications. The organization had nurtured Li Linfu for years, and now that he was Prime Minister, he thought that he could get out without paying back anything? Was anything ever that easy? Li Linfu dropped his head and said nothing. Li Linfu, I know that you have already fallen out of favor. All of this is linked to that king of foreign lands. On this point, we actually share a common enemy. As long as you help me this once, I guarantee that I can help you remove the king of foreign lands, perhaps even that Li Heng as well. When the time comes, we will place someone else on the throne, or perhaps you are also a member of the imperial household. If you are willing, I can make you master of the Great Tang. If you do not wish to have too much interaction after this, once this matter is over, I can guarantee that our relationship will end there and will cease affecting you. As Genesis Supreme spoke, his expression and tone softened. But before any of this can happen, you must help with this matter. Moreover, it's about time you paid me for my services. What do you want me to do? After a period of internal struggle, Li Linfu finally spoke. And can you really get rid of Wang Chong? Upon hearing Li Linfu's last question, Genesis Supreme and the Tianfu Divine Lord smiled. In the end, what Li Linfu cared the most about was power. Sir Li should know of the venerable Genesis Supreme's power, the Tianfu Divine Lord suddenly commented. Wang Chong lately has been like a turtle in its shell, not daring to leave the capital. Why do you think that is? You don't really think it's because he was cultivating in his estate, do you? Li Linfu nodded. He did not doubt their strength, and this was why he had come. Seeing that Li Linfu had agreed, Genesis Supreme said, Relax. What I need you to do this time is very simple and will pose no danger to you. You simply need to find someone for me. Find someone? Li Linfu creased his brow, raising his head in surprise. He had thought of many possibilities, but he had never imagined that Genesis Supreme would cause such a stir in the capital simply so that he could find someone. No one understood more than him the power of the men in black. Genesis Supreme could simply appoint someone to find whoever this person was. There was no need to mobilize the Prime Minister of the Great Tang. And how could people of their ability fail to find a person? As if knowing what Li Linfu was thinking, Genesis Supreme waved his sleeve and indifferently said, "Of course it's not that simple. This person is very special, and after racking my mind, I find that you are only the person who can find his location." "Who is it?" Li Linfu creased his brow in surprise. While he had originally come to complete his agreement with Genesis Supreme and had been rather reluctant, Genesis Supreme's words had piqued his curiosity. What sort of person did Genesis Supreme want to find that not even the men in black could find? Why could only he find him? "I wish you to find a person of extremely high status, someone who should have reigned over the realm but has now been forgotten, a former loser." Genesis Supreme smiled as he spoke a riddle. "A sovereign of the realm. Loser." Li Linfu was perplexed. Genesis Supreme was not one to joke. What sort of person could have had the power to rule the realm yet had been forgotten? When had such a person appeared in the Great Tang? "Humph. Li Linfu, you shouldn't have forgotten the Divine Dragon coup from 30 years ago, right?" Genesis Supreme suddenly said. Bang! As if he had been struck by a bolt of lightning, Li Linfu shuddered and stared in disbelief at Genesis Supreme. You're talking about him?" Li Linfu was shaken, his mind reeling. He had never imagined that Genesis Supreme would be looking for him. He was the only one in the realm who matched Genesis Supreme's conditions. Genesis Supreme earnestly nodded. The deposed crown prince, Li Xuantu. 30 years ago, he had been the Sage Emperor's greatest rival. And in the Divine Dragon coup, he had almost become the true ruler of the realm. If not for that coup, the Great Tang might have been completely different. But didn't Li Xuantu die in that coup? Li Linfu said. Everyone knew that the Sage Emperor had emerged victorious in the Divine Dragon coup. With the defeat of the Crown Prince, the Sage Emperor assumed the throne and became the ruler of the Great Tang, the architect of a golden age. As for the deposed Crown Prince, losers all suffered the same fate. Li Xuantu never appeared again after the coup, and the final result was obvious. Genesis Supreme was implying that Li Xuantu was not dead? But how could that be? Li Xuantu had possessed extraordinary talent and had been the Sage Emperor's strongest rival. There had been many times when he had almost pushed the Sage Emperor into a dead end, and the previous emperor had greatly favored him, believing that he could succeed the throne. How could the Sage Emperor not have killed such a significant threat after emerging victorious in the coup? After so many years, was he still alive? You're too naive. If Li Xuantu were really dead, I wouldn't have come to find you. According to our intelligence reports, while Li Xuantu was defeated in the coup 30 years ago, your Sage Emperor spared his life and imprisoned him in a secret location. We've searched many places but have failed to find him. But based on the results, all the evidence points at the Imperial Palace. For so many years, Li Tai had him at his side this whole time. Although our group is immensely powerful, this is true only outside the capital. The capital and the Imperial Palace are enclosed within a domain that prevents our people from entering. Only you can accomplish this task. Genesis Supreme turned to Li Linfu. Li Linfu's heart was in turmoil. If what Genesis Supreme said was true and that man was still alive, the entire power structure of the realm could shift. This was a result he had never expected from his meeting with Genesis Supreme. Li Linfu suppressed his shock and nodded. Understood. I will help you find this man. After exchanging a few more words with Genesis Supreme, Li Linfu left. Genesis Supreme and the Tianfu Divine Lord watched as he disappeared from sight. The Tianfu Divine Lord drew back his gaze and asked, Venerable One, though he is the Prime Minister, he is an ordinary man without the strength to truss a chicken. Can he really find Li Xuantu? He was also surprised to learn that Genesis Supreme wanted to find the deposed Crown Prince. But in his view, Li Linfu was a feeble scholar, and he simply couldn't bring himself to trust such a man. Heh! You cannot underestimate this mortal. He has far greater abilities than you can imagine. A man who can sit on the seat of Prime Minister is not as simple as you think, Genesis Supreme coldly said, looking in the direction Li Linfu had left. With a shake of his sleeve, Genesis Supreme turned around and vanished. As time went on, the capital remained peaceful. As the new emperor presided over the realm, everyone soaked in a harmonious atmosphere. But beneath the peaceful surface, the undercurrent grew more and more furious, though only a few people knew of this. 10 days later, Wang Chong's 3 divine embryos finished their long trek and returned to the capital. Buzz. In the main hall, the floor rippled as Wang Chong's 3 divine embryos emerged out of the ground, radiating brown, azure, and golden light respectively. But the greatest change was with the energy on their bodies. This time, the 3 divine embryos had a faint hint of space-time energy. Not bad. It really was a good harvest. Wang Chong looked in delight at the 3 divine embryos. The harvest had been much greater than he had initially imagined. Destroying the teleportation gate was good enough, but he had also obtained the precious law energy within Firmament Supreme's Grotto Heaven core. Though Firmament Supreme eventually self-detonated and destroyed a part of the law energy, if he gathered together all of the Grotto Heaven core law energy the 3 divine embryos had collected, he had around 80%. Once the time is right, I can combine these Grotto Heaven laws together and have a much easier time cultivating. Wang Chong's eyes were bright with satisfaction. The peak of the subtle realm and the Grotto Heaven realm seemed only 1 step apart, but in truth it was a gap as great as that between heaven and earth. Yet, in obtaining Firmament Supreme's Grotto Heaven law, he essentially had a staircase crossing this gap. It would now take much less time and difficulty for him to reach the Grotto Heaven realm. Faceless man, come here. Wang Chong turned his gaze to the other side of the hall, where the faceless man was standing. With the mission at the shores of the Caspian Sea over, the faceless man had returned to the capital. More importantly, the faceless man had also absorbed some of the precious Grotto Heaven stellar energy from Firmament Supreme and was showing signs of advancement. Your Excellency, the faceless man silently came forward and bowed. This is for you. This contains knowledge of the origin of energy, and I have also added in part of my memories and understanding. Take it and digest this knowledge. At your level, once you comprehend the origin of energy, you have a high chance of reaching the subtle realm, which will make you much more helpful in future operations. Wang Chong said from the raised platform. Bang! He flicked his finger, sending a warm ball of light flying through the air and into the faceless man's body. Many thanks, Master. The faceless man bowed, but his voice did not carry much emotion. You're dismissed. Wang Chong waved his hand, and the faceless man took his leave. He had his own places to be. If he did not wish to report something to Wang Chong would not ask. The hall fell silent. With the faceless man gone, Wang Chong waved his hand, closing the doors of the hall. In a flash of light, Wang Chong activated the powerful protective formation he had requested the formation elder to set up underneath the hall, covering the entire hall in a barrier. Boom boom boom. At this moment, the air in the hall rumbled as Wang Chong and his 3 divine embryos all exploded with howling energy. Behind them, golden pavilions manifested, magnificent and grandiose, seeming to extend into the depths of space-time. The Transmigration heaven. At this moment, Wang Chong and his 3 divine embryos were all using the supreme art of the central planes. Each of these Transmigration heavens was at least 25 floors, with divine embryo ones rising up to 27 floors. Buzz! Wang Chong appeared in the center of the hall, positioning himself and 3 divine embryos so that they were in the positions of the Azure Dragon, White Tiger, Vermilion Bird, and Xuanwu Turtle, the 4 directions. The 4 Transmigration heavens were pushed to their limit and began to fuse together. Their 4 energies began to fuse, strands of golden origin immortal stellar energy flowing between the 4 pavilions. And within these streams of origin immortal stellar energy were mysterious strands of spacetime energy. Wang Chong's 3 clones had seized Firmament Supreme's Grotto Heaven core laws and stellar energy, and they were now sharing it with Wang Chong's original body, with the Transmigration heaven serving as the bridge, the grotto heaven stellar energy and laws slowly moved to Wang Chong's original body. As these powers nurtured him, Wang Chong grew stronger and stronger. Buzz. Space rippled as Wang Chong's 25-floor Transmigration heaven rose another floor. 26 floors. It had taken only a few moments for Wang Chong to achieve a breakthrough, rising to the 26th floor of the Transmigration heaven. And just a few moments later, boom! The Transmigration heaven behind Wang Chong trembled again and rose to 27 floors. Just a few moments' effort had been the equivalent of a hard year of cultivation. Not only that, as Wang Chong benefited from the energy of his divine embryos, his own stellar energy flowed back into the divine embryos. The 3 divine embryos had all been damaged on this journey to the Caspian Sea, but Wang Chong's actual body was unharmed. The stellar energy of the original body began to rapidly heal the injuries of the 3 divine embryos. After a long time, buzz, the majestic Transmigration heavens dissipated, the dazzling light returning to Wang Chong's body. Wang Chong and the 3 divine embryos ended their cultivation. Go! Wang Chong waved his hand, and the 3 divine embryos obeyed, the floor under them rippling as they sank back into the earth to cultivate. Moving from the subtle realm to the grotto heaven realm was no easy task. Talent and luck were both needed. With Firmament Supreme's grotto heaven law, Wang Chong now had an entry ticket. Advancing to the grotto heaven realm is no minor task. I should first bring my original body and my 3 clones all to the half-step grotto heaven realm. Then, I can gather together the power of the 3 divine embryos and break through in one go. This will greatly increase my chances, Wang Chong quietly said to himself. Plans were needed before moving out, and while Wang Chong was anxious to break into the grotto heaven realm, he could not rush the matter too much. It was not the best time to advance. Come in. Wang Chong quickly turned his eyes to the door. He could sense that someone had been standing there for some time. Creak. Xianxia came in with a stack of intelligence reports. Your Highness. Wang Chong waved his sleeve and asked, What business do you have? Your Highness, some reports concerning Li Linfu, Xianxia loudly said. Oh! Wang Chong's eyes gleamed. Old Eagle, after obtaining Wang Chong's approval, had engaged in several small operations against Li Linfu. Li Linfu lacked martial prowess, but he was a master political operator. After some thought, Wang Chong wasn't able to allay his anxieties, so he had tasked Xianxia with keeping watch on Li Linfu. Xianxia was to report any movement from Li Linfu to Wang Chong in a timely fashion. Speak. What has Li Linfu done recently? Wang Chong said. Li Linfu was extremely shrewd, but he also cherished his reputation. This was why he spoke with a honeyed mouth while concealing a blade behind his back. Even when Li Linfu hated someone to his bones, he would maintain his usual grace, a smile on his face and nary a curse on his lips. This was not merely to make his enemy let down his guard. It was also because he valued his reputation, and his efforts had earned him the reputation as a renowned minister. Now that Old Eagle had let out rumors exposing his old scandals, Li Linfu would not let the matter go. But Xianxia's answer left Wang Chong surprised. Your Highness, there's been nothing. Although all sorts of scandalous rumors have been circulating through society as of late and many officials have begun to distance themselves from him, Li Linfu has been abnormally quiet. Moreover, there have been several court sessions where he has decided not to attend, seemingly knowing that His Majesty was displeased. Xianxia bowed and said, We've observed him for a long time, but the gate of Li Linfu's residence has remained shut. No one goes in or out except some servants. Li Linfu probably knows that his time is done, and is preparing to prioritize his safety and start avoiding Your Highness. Wang Chong's brows instantly creased. Your Highness, what's wrong? Xianxia's heart tensed in surprise. Wang Chong's reaction was completely different from what he had imagined. His liege was the son of Heaven's disciple heavily favored by the previous emperor, and also good friends with the new emperor. With his achievements, it was reasonable for Li Linfu to feel that his time was over and that he was no match. A new government was in power now, and if his liege was willing, he could take Li Linfu's prime minister post for himself. Li Linfu would never be able to overcome his liege. But his liege did not seem happy in the slightest. "Something is wrong," Wang Chong tersely replied. In any dimension, whether this life or his last life, Li Linfu was a formidable character with a burning desire for power. To seize his power was no different from killing him. If he hadn't wanted to protect his post, Li Linfu wouldn't have caused so much trouble in the past. His backstabbing ways, the regional commander's incident, his grudges against the Wang clan, everything Li Linfu had done was to solidify his position. This distant member of the imperial household who had been down and out for several decades had finally ascended to the apex of power, and he would not relinquish it so easily. But despite being wounded, Li Linfu had gotten even more inconspicuous rather than countering. This wasn't his style at all. Wang Chong sensed that there was a big problem here. Wang Chong's brow twitched as he suddenly said, "Increase the number of men. Keep a 24-hour watch on Li Linfu. I need to know his every movement." "This, yes." Xianxia was startled, but he quickly lowered his head and affirmed. This development was completely different from what Xianxia had imagined, but he had never doubted Wang Chong's judgment. Xianxia hastily departed. He worked quickly, and within one day, all of the information concerning Li Linfu arrived in Wang Chong's hands. "What? Li Linfu is checking out palace records, and all of them from 30 years ago." Wang Chong deeply furrowed his brow as he read the report. Matters could be separated into different levels of seriousness and priority. Li Linfu's matter was secondary, and Wang Chong was only having Xianxia investigate him to guard against any disturbance at this time. After all, the Yuzhou War was imminent. Wang Chong had never expected that Li Linfu would actually be trying something. Palace records concerned mostly the imperial household, and outsiders found it hard to access them. But Li Linfu did have the privilege and status to read them. Yet Wang Chong was confused as to why someone of Li Linfu's status wanted to read these records. "Our investigations have revealed that 70% of the books Li Linfu has read are connected to the Divine Dragon coup. While he has also checked out other records, these are mostly a cover. This is the full list of records." As Xianxia spoke, he handed over another report. With Wang Chong's current strength and influence, if he wanted to investigate any one person in the capital, it didn't matter how well the other party tried to hide it, even if the other party was Li Linfu. Wang Chong took the report and began to read it. His brow creased more and more. Wang Chong had done a similar thing, but that had been concerning the Sage Emperor. With the Sage Emperor having passed and a new emperor on the throne, the Divine Dragon coup from 30 years ago should have had no influence on the present. This old fox, what is he thinking? Wang Chong was perplexed. Li Linfu didn't do things for no reason, and Wang Chong was sure that he had some ulterior motive. "Has Li Linfu noticed anything?" Wang Chong asked. "No, we entrusted eunuch Bian with investigating the matter, and the guards protecting the palace records do not have such loose mouths," Xianxia replied. Li Linfu was a civil official, and with Bian Lingcheng colluding with them, it was far too easy to secretively investigate Li Linfu. "If that's the case, does His Majesty know?" Wang Chong was pensive. Xianxia bowed and said, "This subordinate does not know, but if everything is as expected, His Majesty should know. If Bian Lingqing knew, then Li Heng also should have known." Wang Chong nodded. Li Linfu's actions were also good for helping Li Heng understand that Li Linfu was far too selfish, far too desirous for power. Li Heng had taken the throne, and a new era had come. This was a time for reform, and there was no seat at the table for Li Linfu. "Continue investigating. Try to bribe Li Linfu's confidence. I want to know what he's hoping to find in these records." Wang Chong's eyelids drooped as he lightly tapped against his desk. There were no impervious walls in the world. In the past, Wang Chong would not have found it so easy to find a weakness in Li Linfu's residence. But now that Li Linfu had fallen out of favor, the times had changed. Several hours later, Wang Chong received his answer. The deposed crown prince, Li Xuantu. Li Linfu wants to find the previous crown prince from 30 years ago. Wang Chong was taken aback by this news, and his brow furrowed. He had to admit that this result was far too surprising. The deposed crown prince, Li Xuantu, had been a crucial character in the Divine Dragon coup. but that man should have died 30 years ago. Why was Li Linfu looking for a dead man? His brow furrowed, and his index finger rhythmically tapped against the desk as he pondered the matter. The answer to his question had only left him more confused. And what did Li Xuantu have to do with Li Linfu's current situation? Had the deposed crown prince left behind some descendant, and Li Linfu wanted to try something with them? Wang Chong shook his head and rejected the idea. He didn't believe in this reason. He hadn't investigated the divine dragon coup very much, but he did know that Li Xuantu had not left any descendants. Moreover, with the new emperor enthroned, any sort of descendant wouldn't be able to cause much of a stir. Someone of Li Linfu's intellect should have understood this. Then, what was he thinking? Increase the number of men. Continue investigating. Wang Chong said. Yes. Zhang Ke nodded and departed. Meanwhile, perhaps Li Linfu had noticed something, or perhaps he was just expressing his cautious nature, but he stopped his research and seemed to calm down. He did not attend court, and he did not leave his residence very much, becoming extremely inconspicuous. If Li Linfu acted like this, then it didn't matter what Wang Chong wanted to find. There was nothing to be done except let the matter go. Several days later, at the top floor of Pearl Moon Pavilion, two figures, one dressed in gold and one dressed in white, sat across from each other. The golden-clothed individual was a young and heroic man wearing an imperial robe, exuding an extraordinary aura. The white-clothed individual was a graceful and elegant woman, like a fairy who had stepped out of a painting. These two were none other than Wang Chong and Su Qiqin. There was a small, square table between them, and on the table rested a ceramic teapot with a slender spout. Two small teacups were placed to their left and right, each one full of fragrant and steaming tea. An ideal pair of lovers, precious tea, fragrant aroma. A tea house built in a classical style. All of it together created a scene out of a fairy tale. There were many things on Wang Chong's plate. If he wasn't busy with affairs of state, he was busy increasing his strength so that he could deal with the men in black. Rarely did he have a moment of peace and quiet like this. Upon receiving an invitation from his lover, Wang Chong had gone over without hesitation. It had been a very long time since they had last met. All was quiet, and Wang Chong's mind was essentially blank as he reached out for his teacup and took a sip. On the other side, Su Qiqin silently examined Wang Chong's determined face, a smile on her lips. This man was growing more mature and steady by the day, more and more like a mighty great general. Perhaps not even Wang Chong had realized how much he had changed, his movements exuding a vigorous and alluring charm. Just by sitting there, Wang Chong exuded a fascinating aura. What's wrong? Looking at Su Qiqin, Wang Chong faintly smiled. It's nothing. The tea here is very fragrant. Su Qiqin smiled, a hand reaching out from a sleeve to lightly and elegantly sip her tea. It truly is good. There are good reasons for the reputation of Mengshi Zhao's Irai tea. Wang Chong indifferently said. Right. How is the matter of the coal proceeding? The mining of coal in Hengan, Yangshuan, and the Shua province was ongoing. There was nothing problematic about mining it, but transporting it and storing it was another matter entirely, far more complex. This was why Wang Chong had left the task to Su Qiqin. Everything is taken care of. The 500 warehouses we've built up across the country have already been filled, Su Qiqin confidently said. Though she was in the capital, everything ran in an orderly fashion. After all, just taking care of some coal was no problem for the famed queen of logistics. I actually have to thank you for letting the Su clan handle such an important task. Big Uncle has asked me to convey his thanks. The clan will probably make quite a lot of money this time. Su Qiqin covered her mouth and giggled. Wang Chong also chuckled at this. The mining of coal needed someone to manage it, and so long as the strategic objective was achieved, Wang Chong didn't care who did it. Moreover, the Great Cold Front was coming, and every second was vital. The great clans were highly efficient, and for Wang Chong, efficiency was of utmost importance. Your big uncle is too polite. The Su clan is a clan of logistics and is far more skilled in this field than any other clan. Moreover, fertile waters shouldn't be allowed to flow into the fields of outsiders. Wang Chong said. Disgusting. Su Qiqin instantly blushed and dropped her head. Wang Chong's heart trembled upon seeing her shy display. But their conversation soon changed topics. Right, you were frowning just now. As if you had something on your mind. Did something happen? Su Qiqin kindly asked, raising her head. It's nothing. Just a few minor matters. Wang Chong said, not trying to make an excuse. He just had too many things to worry about. The capital is just a little too peaceful. Be watchful in this period. If it's not necessary, you should send others to do your errands. Wang Chong's eyes flashed with worry. What? You're worried about my safety? Su Qiqin was touched by Wang Chong's concern. Are you worried about that Genesis Supreme? Do you feel that he might do me harm? Wang Chong nodded. Refrain from hurting others, but keep on guard against those who might hurt you. Genesis Supreme's activities around the capital are too frequent as of late. If he doesn't get what he wants soon, if he can't break the miniature 9 provinces domain, he might start resorting to other methods. Wang Chong said. He had recently sensed the auras of Genesis Supreme and the Tianfu Divine Lord around the domain. These two powerful foes keeping watch on him from the outside was no good experience. It's not that easy. Big Uncle has already increased the guards around me, and the Imperial Army has adjusted its patrol routes. Every hour, another patrol group passes by our house. Moreover, didn't you also leave a mental brand on me? Su Qiqin asked. Wang Chong had gone to surprising lengths to protect Su Qiqin.